Is this a dangerous road? Well, according to the NHTSA it is. I'm just going to show how dangerous it really is. Okay, well, all humor aside, this isn't the kind of road the NHTSA is referring to. Rural roads, by statistics, have far more accidents per vehicle miles traveled, or VMT is the number they use, which is about 1 fatality for every 100 million miles, although I believe on rural roads it's 1.7. So this isn't the kind of road they're talking about. I just chose it out of irony because I'm only about, a mile out of city limits. I'm about a mile from the interstate, and this quiet road gets about, it's a through street and it only gets about 1 car every 5 minutes. And so this is just another video looking at statistics for fun. You take away what you will from it, but it's kind of interesting to learn the debate and what kind of leads to these fatalities. Okay, for starters, before we get into this, let's just set the ground base here that this is for entertainment purposes only. I'm not looking for arguments. I just think this is fun. Otherwise, I normally would only be showing motorcycle statistics, but this particular data set is applying to mostly passenger cars, and so we all get to enjoy a little bit of what I'm about to read here. Okay, so touching base on what I was talking about here. So 42,000 deaths or whatever in 2021 again, and of those, 40%, that's 17,000 people, of these fatalities occurred in rural areas versus the 26,000 almost, 60% in urban areas. So obviously there's more deaths in the urban areas, but what the talking point tends to be is that vehicle miles traveled. That's what really seems to matter here. And so what their argument is as to why rural roads are more dangerous than urban roads, despite all the chaos on urban roads, it comes down to a lot of little things. So here's the vehicle miles traveled though. Okay, so this VMT chart here, this graph, what this is showing is we've got, this is the overall crashes happening. Blue, of course, is rural, orange is urban. So you can see overall urban crashes, fatalities are increasing, rural fatalities are decreasing on this chart. Over here we actually have the VMT section, so this is showing how the per 100 million miles, that's a fatality for every 100 million miles. They're coming closer together. You have orange increasing, blue decreasing, 1.74 for every 100 million miles on the rural section, and 1.19 for the urban section. So these numbers are actually coming closer together. Okay, so this chart looks a little further back in time. I mean, we're going back to 1977 now, but only, well, it goes to 2021 still, showing the same thing. Back in 77, urban was 40%, rural was 60%, and over time, they have flip-flopped around, become a little bit safer. Same chart here, looking back to 1977. Rural was 4.35 deaths per 100 million miles traveled, as where urban was 2.35, and now they have flip-flopped. They've met in the middle. They're almost tied. Let's put it that way. So it just kind of goes to show you things are improving over time. So let's take a look at what is causing these accidents, and is that anything to think about? Okay, it's important to mention in this that, I mean, this is looking at the types of vehicles involved in these accidents, and they do include everybody. You've got cars, minivans, pickups, SUVs for some reason separate, semi-trucks, motorcycles, pedestrians, bicycles. Everyone's on this chart, so there's no favorites here. So those numbers include everybody. Okay, so this is a fun talking point here. This was the point of the opening of my video, is discerning the difference of where these crashes are happening, the different types of roads we have in the U.S. And so if you go down this real fast, you've got in the rural, 14% are interstate, 23 arterial, 44 collector, and 19 are local roads. In the urban, however, 21 interstate, 58 arterial, 11 collector, and 11 local. And so breaking this down, so what are we talking about here? 58% of deaths in the urban area are going to be your busy boulevards. This is where all the stoplights are, all the grocery stores are, the gas stations, those busy lanes where there's a lot of action happening, a lot of crosswalks. The speed limits are usually 45 miles an hour. That's what an arterial road is. This is where all the roads lead into. It's the artery. The collector road in the rural area, however, is 44%, equally high. What is a collector road, though? That's confusing, because in the urban area, collector roads are slower roads. In the rural areas, however, a collector road is going to be that narrow 2-lane road with ditches on both sides, and there's not a lot of room for error usually. These are the roads that are going to get you from the city to the highway. And so a collector road, I mean, they'll have whatever road. We'll just make up a name, Farmstead Road. They'll just have a road name like that. But that road, which could have a speed limit of 55 miles an hour, is a collector road. And hence why the accidents are higher on those roads, because I believe the statistic is 66% of all accidents that happen in a rural area are lane departures. And so that means you've crossed over the line, you've driven into the ditch. Both of those scenarios are bad when you are in a rural area, and that will lead to higher fatalities. Okay, so here we have a fun little graphic that I found that shows all the different roads in America, the classification system that they're using from the DOT up here. So if you can figure out what this is, good on you, because I don't know what I'm looking at, but that's supposed to be a rural arterial road. However, this is an urban arterial road, which is what I've been trying to describe. Most dangerous roads in America, 2, 4, 8 lanes of traffic, whatever's on them. Speed limits are probably 45, 55 miles an hour even. This is where all your action is going to be happening. You got a grocery store or something back here on the corner. Anyways, this is where things go wrong a lot in the urban area. Rural interstate here, however, you can see has got nothing going on. Very, very small amount of fatalities happen on those kinds of roads. Urban interstate as well, they do happen, but same thing, this is mostly stop and go traffic. This, however, is the most dangerous rural type of road, a collector road, 55 mile an hour road. You can imagine they're saying this one is in New York. I would not say this picture describes most collector roads, but as you can see, there's a yellow line here, and if you cross that line, you're probably going to hit somebody head on and die. Vice versa, if you deviate from the road, you're probably going to fall into a lake in this scenario, or drive off into a tree. That's why these roads cause so many accidents. I believe the statistic I will find later for you is 66% of all fatalities on rural roads are lane departures. That means people have driven off the lane and crashed into somebody. And similarly, I think I will also find a statistic elsewhere, 50% of all fatalities in rural roads involve people not wearing their seatbelts. And so these simple things are kind of what break down most rural accidents. And so very understandable. A head-on collision anywhere is never a good thing. Urban collector roads, a little more boring. These are the most common roads in America, we find. Just, we all know them. You putter down a 2-lane road until you get somewhere exciting. In the opening, however, I was on a rural local road, very quiet and absolutely nothing going on. Usually there's just houses on them, quiet roads. However, an urban local road is going to have parking, probably some coffee shops, a random guy walking across the street. So you get it. That's kind of the breakdown of the roads in America. And important because when they are defining dangerous roads, that's what they're talking about. Okay, so this one's a little hard to kind of digest, but what you'll find here is it's talking about the speed limits, who is speeding in these areas and the fatalities, percentages, blah, 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 blah. Interesting because speeding related deaths in a less than 35 mile an hour area were highest. So that's 41% of speeds of 41% of speed related deaths in this area, in a rural area, and 34% in an urban area. The other ones are quite lower. Obviously, 55 mile an hour zones have the highest fatality rates, but of those, only 26% were speed related. So that's about the best I can break that down to. I mean, it's a problem, but it's not as big of a problem. The latest numbers suggested that rural was only making up for what I believe is 29%, and urban was 30%. So they're about the same, but about 30% of people are drunk. Seatbelt use, however, this is where things got more important. Okay, so this is what I was talking about earlier at seatbelt use. Just breaking it down real quick here. 51% of passenger vehicle occupants in rural areas were understrained compared to 49% in urban areas. However, the new one is pickup trucks. 61% of pickup occupants in rural areas were not wearing seatbelts. The highest percentage of any vehicle occupant killed amongst both rural and urban. So SUVs 51%, vans are 42%. The numbers are pretty similar, rural or urban, so it's just the same people. Rollover accidents, this was interesting. What is the number? Is it 36% of the 12,000 vehicles, of the 12,000 passenger vehicle occupants killed in rural areas in 21? There were 36% of those were killed in rollovers. So rollovers do make a high percentage. And of those, 66% of them were not wearing seatbelts. Non-occupants is all these bicycles and stuff, so moving on. State use, however, this is where things get really regionally based, depends on where you're at, if you kind of dig through this, but I don't have time to go through state by state. I find that almost all these, that I can tell at least, there's always going to be a higher fatality rate per 100 million miles traveled rural than urban. Just take, for example, so California here. They may have 1,200 fatalities rural, 3,000 fatalities almost in the urban, but the number is still going to suggest that rural is far more dangerous per miles traveled because of 2.21 for rural and 1.19. Other examples, Florida, for example, is completely flip-flop. 778 fatalities versus urban 3,000 almost, and yet it's still going to be 1.64 fatalities in the urban, 2.6 in rural. Just suggesting that people just aren't using the rural roads there as much, if there is any. So yeah, as you get over to the more desolate states, Oregon's where I'm at, we've got more rural deaths, 344 versus 255. And it comes out to be roughly double at 2.31 for rural and 1.16 for urban. Anyways, I think the only exception that I saw was Washington, D.C. because they don't actually have any rural roads, but that's cheating. Well, maybe I'll just pause it here and you can kind of look at your own state and see where you stand in the rankings just for fun. But yeah, they all show that rural roads have more fatalities per mile. Okay, so here we are at the roadway departures I mentioned earlier. 53% of roadway departure accidents were happening in rural, 47% happened in urban, 25% of intersection-related accidents were happening in rural, 74% were in the urban area. Okay, there was 27,000 drivers in 2021 that died. 69% of the drivers that were killed in the rural areas, they died at the scene of the crash, compared to 52% of drivers that died at the scene in urban areas. 39% of all drivers killed were transported to hospitals, and 2% of them died en route. And of the drivers who were transported to hospitals and that died en route, 56% of those were in rural areas and 44% were in urban areas. So that's to say, obviously, there's a 12% more likely chance that you're going to die en route if your accident is in a rural area. Obviously, the hospital's farther away, right? So what do we make of all this data? I don't really know. It's just for entertainment, I guess. Drive safe.